I never expected that the woman who would change my life would arrive at my curb in a silver sedan with a cracked bumper sticker and a playlist that felt like she'd curated it specifically for my soul. She was just my Uber driver. That's all she was supposed to be. A stranger paid to get me from point A to point B, someone whose name I'd forget by morning. But on a rainy Thursday night in October, when the storm turned the city into a blur of neon and water, she pulled up to my building, looked at me through rain, streaked windows, and asked a question that unraveled every wall I'd ever built. "Can I come upstairs?" And just like that, everything changed. Before I tell you how a ride home became the beginning of the rest of my life, tell me what city you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe. It really does help this little channel about women loving women reach more people who need these stories. My name is Margot Hayes. I'm 34, I work as a grant writer for a nonprofit, and until 6 months ago, I was the kind of person who had her life neatly categorized into spreadsheets and 5-year plans. I lived alone in a small but tidy apartment on the east side. I had 3 close friends I saw on rotation, and I dated occasionally but never seriously. My last relationship had ended 2 years prior. A quiet fizzle with a woman who said I was too cautious, too careful, too afraid to let anyone really see me. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent most of my adult life building a fortress of routine and self-sufficiency, convincing myself that control was the same thing as happiness. It was a Wednesday evening in early September when I first met her. I'd stayed late at the office finishing a proposal that was due the next morning, the kind of work that required silence and caffeine and the low hum of anxiety that had become my baseline. By the time I logged off, the sun had set and my car was in the shop for the 3rd time that month. I opened the rideshare app, requested a ride, and went downstairs to wait. The air was still warm but carried the first hint of autumn, that smell of cooling pavement and distant wood smoke. I stood under the awning, scrolling through emails I'd already read, when a silver Toyota Camry pulled up. The driver's window rolled down halfway. "Margot," she called, her voice low and slightly raspy in a way that made me look up from my phone. "That's me," I said, pulling open the back door. "Hop in." "I'm Sam." I slid into the back seat and buckled up, glancing at the front where Sam sat with one hand on the wheel, the other adjusting the rearview mirror. She had short dark hair tucked behind her ears, a strong jawline, and eyes that looked almost gold in the streetlight. She wore a faded band tee and a leather jacket that had clearly seen better days. There was something effortlessly cool about her, the kind of presence that made you want to sit up a little straighter. "Long day?" she asked, as we pulled into traffic. "You could say that," I replied, leaning back into the seat. "You?" "Every day's long when you're driving strangers around. A city that never learned how to merge," she said with a grin that softened her whole face. "But hey, at least the playlist's good?" She wasn't lying. Soft indie rock filled the car, a band I vaguely recognized but couldn't name. The music mixed with the hum of the engine and the distant sounds of the city, creating a strange kind of cocoon that made me feel, for the first time all day, like I could breathe. We didn't talk much on that first ride. She asked where I worked. I asked how long she'd been driving, and we fell into the comfortable silence of 2 people who understood that sometimes quiet is enough. When we arrived at my building, I thanked her, gave her 5 stars, and went inside without a second thought. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Over the next few weeks, I saw Sam again, and again, and again. At first, I thought it was coincidence. The algorithm, the timing, the sheer randomness of a city with thousands of drivers. But after the 4th time her silver Camry pulled up to my office, I started to wonder if maybe fate had a sense of humor. "We've got to stop meeting like this," she said one evening as I climbed into the back seat, shaking rain from my jacket. I laughed. "Are you following me?" "Only if the app tells me to," she replied, pulling into traffic. "Though I gotta say, you're one of my favorite regulars." "I'm a regular now." "Anyone I pick up more than twice gets upgraded to regular status." "It's an exclusive club." There was something about Sam that made conversations feel easy. She never pried, never pushed, but she had a way of asking questions that made you want to answer them. Over the course of those rides, I learned that she was 32, that she'd moved to the city 5 years ago to escape a small town that Felt like it was suffocating her that she drove Uber to pay the bills while working on a novel she was unsure anyone would ever read. She loved old horror movies, terrible dive bars, and thunderstorms that made the whole world feel electric. I told her about my work, about the strange satisfaction of writing grant proposals that might fund something meaningful, about my tiny apartment that I decorated with thrift store finds and too many plants. I told her about my college years spent chasing a degree I wasn't sure I wanted, about my mother who called every Sunday to ask when I'd find someone, and settled down about the quiet loneliness that sometimes crept in late at night when the city went silent. With every ride, the distance between us shrank. I started sitting in the front seat. We traded music recommendations. She told me about her novel, a queer ghost story set in the Midwest, and I found myself genuinely invested in whether her main character would survive the haunted farmhouse. I told her about the nonprofit drama, the coworker who took credit for my ideas, the exhaustion of caring so much about work that barely paid enough to cover rent. One night in late September, after a particularly brutal day, I got into her car and immediately felt the tears I'd been holding back all afternoon start to well up. Sam glanced at me in the mirror, her expression shifting from casual to concerned in an instant. "Hey," she said gently, pulling over into a quiet side street instead of heading toward my apartment. "You okay?" I shook my head, wiping at my eyes with the sleeve of my jacket. "Not really, sorry, this is unprofessional." "Unprofessional?" She turned in her seat to look at me fully. "Margot, I'm not your boss. I'm just someone who drives you home, and right now you look like you need to talk. So talk. Or don't. But I'm not going anywhere until you're ready." Something about her tone, the way she said it without an ounce of pity or discomfort, broke the dam. I told her everything. About the funding that fell through, about the project I'd spent months on that was now dead in the water, about the feeling that no matter how hard I worked, it would never be enough. She listened without interrupting, her eyes steady on mine, her presence a kind of anchor I didn't know I needed. When I finally ran out of words, she reached back and squeezed my hand. "Just once. Just enough. You're allowed to feel this," she said quietly. "And for the record, anyone who doesn't see how much you care is an idiot." I laughed through the tears, a wet, messy sound. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," she said, turning back to the wheel. "Now let's get you home. And tomorrow you're going to wake up and keep going. Because that's what people like us do." That night, lying in bed with the sound of the city humming outside my window, I realized that Sam had become more than just my Uber driver. She'd become the person I looked forward to seeing, the person whose presence made the hard days feel a little less heavy, and that realization terrified me. October arrived with a cold snap and the kind of rain that felt personal. The city turned gray and slick, the streets reflecting neon signs and headlights in watery smears. I kept requesting rides, kept hoping it would be Sam, and more often than not, it was. We started texting between rides, little things at first. She'd send me a song. I'd send her a terrible meme. She'd ask how my day went. I'd ask about her novel. Slowly, carefully, we built something that felt like friendship, but hummed with an undercurrent I didn't have the courage to name. One Thursday in mid-October, the rain came down so hard it felt like the sky was trying to drown the world. I finished work late, exhausted and soaked from the walk to the building's entrance. I requested a ride, praying it would be Sam, and felt a rush of relief when her name popped up on the screen. She pulled up a few minutes later, and I practically dove into the front seat, shaking water from my hair like a dog. "You look like you just swam here," she said, handing me a towel she kept in the car. "I might as well have," I muttered, pressing the towel to my face. "This city is a disaster. It's got character," she said, pulling into the downpour. "Plus, rain like this makes everything feel cinematic. Like we're in the emotional climax of a movie. If this is the climax, I want a refund," I said, but I was smiling despite myself. We drove in comfortable silence for a while, the rain drumming against the roof, the wipers working overtime. The playlist was softer tonight, something slow and aching that matched the weather. I stared out the window at the blurred city, feeling the weight of the week pressing down on my chest. "Can I ask you something?" Sam said after a while, her voice barely audible over the storm. Sure, I replied, glancing at her profile. Why do you always seem like you're carrying the weight of the world? The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to deflect, to make a joke, but something in the way she asked made me stop. I don't know, I admitted. I guess I've always felt like if I don't hold it all together, everything will fall apart. And what happens if you let go? She asked, eyes on the road but her attention entirely on me. I don't know, I said again, quieter this time. I've never tried. She didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost hesitant. Maybe you should. We pulled up to my building a few minutes later, the rain still pouring, the street empty except for us. I should have thanked her, paid, and gone inside, but I didn't move. Neither did she. We sat there in the idling car, the air thick with something unspoken. Something I've been pretending not to feel for weeks. Sam, I started, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned to look at me, and in the dim glow of the dashboard I saw it. The same want, the same fear, the same question I'd been too afraid to ask. Can I come upstairs? She said, her voice steady, but her eyes searching mine for permission. My heart hammered in my chest. Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was a bad idea, that I didn't even really know her, that crossing this line would complicate everything. But the rest of me, the part I'd been ignoring for so long, didn't care. Yes, I said. We didn't say anything as we got out of the car and ran through the rain to the building's entrance. We didn't say anything in the elevator, standing side by side, our shoulders touching, the air between us electric. We didn't say anything as I fumbled with my keys, finally pushing the door open and stepping into the warm safety of my apartment. It was only when we were inside, dripping rain onto the floor, that she spoke. I need you to know, she said, her voice low and serious, that I didn't plan this. I didn't expect this. But I can't pretend anymore that you're just someone I drive home. I stepped closer, my heart in my throat. What are you saying? I'm saying, she said, closing the distance between us, that I like you. A lot. And if you don't feel the same, I'll leave right now and we can pretend this never happened. But if you do ... I didn't let her finish. I kissed her. It wasn't graceful or cinematic. It was desperate and messy and real. The kind of kiss that tastes like rain and risk and the terrifying thrill of letting someone in. She kissed me back, her hands gentle on my face. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. We stayed up all night talking, curled up on my couch with mugs of tea going cold in our hands. She told me about her ex, about the heartbreak that had driven her to the city, about the novel she was writing as a way to make sense of her own story. I told her about my walls, about the fear that had kept me safe but also kept me alone, about the way she'd somehow slipped past every defense I'd ever built. As the sun started to rise, painting my apartment in soft gold, she took my hand and said, I don't know what this is yet, but I want to find out. If you do, I nodded, too full of hope to speak. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments and late-night conversations. Sam still drove, still picked up other passengers, but our time together became sacred. We went to dive bars and art galleries, watched terrible horror movies in her tiny studio apartment, cooked meals that were more about the company than the food. She read me chapters of her novel, and I started writing again, little things at first, poems and thoughts I'd buried under years of practicality. She met my friends, and they loved her immediately. Kot pulled me aside at brunch one morning and whispered, If you let this one go, I'm adopting her. I didn't plan on letting her go. 3 months after that rainy night, we were walking through the park on a cold December afternoon when she stopped suddenly and turned to me. Move in with me, she said. I blinked. What? 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 What December afternoon night? We were walking through the park on a cold December afternoon when she stopped suddenly and turned to me. Move in with me, she said. I blinked. Walking through that rainy night. Move in with me, she repeated. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy. But I'm tired of saying goodbye at the end of the night. I want to wake up with you. I want to build something with you. So move in with me. I thought about my tiny apartment, about the walls I'd built, about the person I used to be who would have said no out of fear. And then I thought about Sam, about the way she made me feel like I could be brave. Okay, I said. She grinned, that same grin that had made me look up from my phone on our first ride, and kissed me right there in the middle of the park. 6 months later, we stood in the apartment we now shared, boxes still half unpacked, and I realized that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you never see coming. Sometimes love arrives in a silver Camry on a rainy night and asks if it can come upstairs. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is say yes. If you're still watching, thank you. Tell me your stories about unexpected love, about the moments that changed everything, about the people who showed up when you needed them most. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about women who love women, because every story matters. She was just my Uber driver. Until that rainy night when she asked if she could come upstairs. And I learned that sometimes the person who drives you home is the person who leads you exactly where you meant to be.